Welcome to the Valley of Outlaws podcast, a podcast for those looking to take the road less trodden, and a podcast for those seeking more. Righty, so, Mr. Weeks, you are Outlaw number 30. Welcome to the podcast.
Fantastic.
I'm going to start off because I don't really refer to most of my guests by Mr. Weeks, but it's because you are my old teacher that I have done this. And I find it very difficult when I find my old teachers and I see them after school to even call them by their first name because I've been so used to calling them by Mr. Weeks or Weeksy or whatever it is. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure.
First question is always the same, and I always like to give people the opportunity to set their own story out in their own words. So who are you, what do you do, and why do you do what you do?
Okay, so fantastic to come on, so thank you for having me. So I'm Henry Weeks, I'm a prep school teacher, and have been working at the same prep school for this is year 20, which has been fantastic. But my role has changed massively in the time that I've been there. So I've done all sorts of different jobs with regards sport, regards science, maths, theology, philosophy and religion, boarding. So a typical prep school teacher who tries to do lots of different things. And in terms of why I do it, I think I reached a point where, when I was growing up, where I thought I might be interested in journalism because I was very lucky to grow up in Bath around the time where Bath Rugby were in their first heyday. Hopefully there's a second heyday at the moment. I then thought, am I going to be able to write much about Bath? Negatively, I thought, no, I'm always going to think they're brilliant. So I then did some summer camps, and people said to me, you have a really good connection with people. And it wasn't so much about being able to teach the English and maths, it was about how people connected with me. And then it sort of led into that, really. And I suppose why I do it is because I see the value that when you connect with somebody and you have an ability to change their lives in ways that you just can't imagine, really.
That's interesting as well, because my next question is the vision you had for yourself when you're younger, how different has it turned out to be? But you've gone through that process in some ways that actually you learned at a certain age, actually your connection with people and the ability to actually inspire them is probably one of the main reasons behind that shift towards teaching.
Yeah, it was actually my sixth form tutor wrote a letter to my parents on just before I finished, and it was all about sort of the end of time at school. And she said that I had a warm and compassionate understanding of people, and he doesn't need to earn that in exams. And it was that sort of, I reflected quite a lot on that as being something that was really important. And I suppose how my journey has travelled on from there has been people skills, communication skills, have always been central to what I think is important. And that's sort of gone through with what I'm doing, really.
Yeah. And what were some of your passions when you were younger?
That's a good question. So it was a lot around rugby, a lot around Bath, and then also I was lucky to grow up on a farm in Somerset, so I loved the countryside, loved shooting, and also the ability to travel where I could, and just having different experiences and not trying to stay within a similar small bubble, which I think is the danger that people do at the moment.
And I guess the journey through teaching, when you started off as a teacher, what was your kind of like mindset towards it? And I guess at any point, has that changed? And how has your approach to teaching changed now compared to then, if it has?
Yeah, so I started in a state primary school for 3 years, and which is where I met the family that we both know.
Yeah.
Then that was very, when my teacher training in the state primary was a different style, and it was very geared towards exams, at the end of year exams, and different families. But even within that environment, which is very different to the school I'm in now, the things that meant the most to me were having the impact on children from a from a holistic sense rather than just simply, oh, well done, you taught him or her to get a level 4 or a level 5 in maths. And it was lovely hearing the journey the other day that a girl I taught my second year of teaching is now performing in ballet shoes at the National.
Wow.
So it's fantastic. And I passed on congratulations to her found contact with her brother and stuff. And it's hearing those stories. And that has always been central to what I do. It was when I first started teaching, I wanted to teach someone or coach someone who would play rugby for a club or internationally. And finding those people that have had those interesting journeys has been, the results, the exam results are lovely, but the development of people is what fundamentally has always been there for me, really. And as society has moved on, that I feel has caught up with what my mindset has always been. So now there's a real desire for people to find their passions, find their strengths, develop. And we get really excited at school when we see there was a lad who's going very well. He's at must be about 16, 17 now, but he's doing quite a high level of karting, and I think has moved into single-seater racing now as well. And you hear these wonderful stories of children not doing the same thing as everybody else, and that's really exciting.
Do you think there was a shift in a certain period, like time period? Because I remember when I was at school, and especially at Molesford, and thinking about career paths and different things, you didn't really have many of the old boys who were doing different things like that. I feel like a lot more now, the cohorts maybe when I was younger are all doing very different things individually, following stuff they would rather do rather than what maybe their parents wanted them to do
100%.
or was expected of them to do in society.
There seems to be much more freedom for children to go off and explore what they wanted to explore. And you look at, for example, on Tuesday, you've got someone who's a couple of years younger than you, who's coming in, who's a DJ, and is going to go and teach the children. He's going to talk to the kids, and then he's going to teach them how to do some DJing. Whereas,
can you imagine?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Whereas in the past, it was very much you're here to do this, and you're here to. There was a very sort of defined way around education, and I think it's much more open now. And when you hear stories of going to some senior schools, I think it was Winchester I went to, and a couple of the lads that showed me around just went, well, if we want to do something, we go and speak to whoever's in charge, and they try and organise it so we can run a club in that. And that was just really exciting. It's not you have to go and play rugby, you have to go and play football. Yeah. It's what do you love?
Should we jump into the high performance lunchtimes? Because I think that's we've talked a few bit about it. We've got people coming in. Like that's a really big core part, I guess, of what you've started and really built into the fabric for Molesford now. So, I mean, how did that start? Why did you start that? And what's kind of the big vision with it?
Well, I suppose it launched during COVID. So this is the High Performance podcast. Launched in COVID with Jake Humphrey and Damien Hughes, and I started listening to it a lot. And I sat there going, just 41 at the time, and I was there thinking, well, and as I carried on listening to it, well, these are lessons that I'm still learning at the age I am, and all these lessons that were coming through. It's like, well, being passionate about things, being kind to people, having the correct values. You don't have to be in your 40s to learn these things. You don't have to be in your 20s. You can learn them at whatever age, and. So, and then it was this feeling that everyone's got a story. And it's very interesting when you talk about it at school. People go, well, I don't know anyone famous. And it's like, you don't need to know anyone famous.
Yeah.
It's just people with a story and people who are prepared to communicate with people. And it was, I think it was September 21, we started it. And it was very much, when in schools are very full and busy environments, so try and fit something in can be really tricky. And there wasn't the straight away people going, well, all right, yeah, you can give it a go. And it was just like, and I was like, and so I sort of said, well, first thought was, will anyone come? Yeah. Is this actually any good? And so my poor class at the time, I said, well, The only people it's compulsory for are you. So they turned up, and we had it in my classroom, and we had the first one was an ex-parent, current parent actually, who works in cybersecurity, and he sat down and he talked through to the boys, and they came away. It wasn't the. This comes back to the motivation about why do it. It comes back to they were thinking, well, this is different. This is something I don't normally learn. And they were able to understand a bit about the cybersecurity industry. And then we had a guest who came on who just suddenly goes, he said, well, when I started, he was a management consultant, and he said, well, I was the expert in pallets, and then he was the expert in biscuits, but the whole time he had a sports book on his desk and he was reading sports books. And he said, then suddenly someone came in and went, well, we need someone who likes something about sport. Anyone know anyone? And it became, what about that bloke who had that book on his desk? And this is the rough story, so apologies to Matt, who's a good friend of mine, if I've misquoted, but it was the rough story that I took away from it. And they went, well, yeah, get him. And that was the way he got into his passions. And so then the kids off the back of that went, oh, passions are quite important. And then we had a lovely guy who hosts a podcast called Egg Chasers, a guy called Jonathan Beardmore, who's his advice will stick with me to this day. He said to the kids, find what you love and do loads of it. And so it's sort of there's a few examples of why I did it, because there was a vacancy. There was certainly an area where children could benefit, and now where we're getting to now, 4 years in, 75 guests in, and I'm coming back to the classroom and children are going, that was incredible. And you kind of go, I'm making a real difference here.
Yeah.
And people are liking the posts, people are getting excited about it. But it all comes back to this big thing about everyone's got a story, and everyone's story is valuable. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be famous. We've had some very famous people on the show, but that's not what's important. It's the fact that everyone's got a story.
100%. I truly believe in that so much, because I think that we peddle this narrative that anyone we see on TV or something must be important to listen to. And it's really not true. Like, people who are on TV want to be on TV, but there's actually a lot of people in the background who've done a lot of very interesting things, who have very interesting life stories and journeys, and actually have a lot of lessons to teach others from their own mistakes and stuff. And they have such value to listen to or to talk to if you can do. It's something which I always try and do, especially with the podcast, is not kind of chase the people who are just on every other podcast. I'd rather speak to people who've never been on a podcast before.
Yes,
and let them have a chance to see what they can say and how they can inspire other people. Because I think that's it's less so. We're so bombarded with so many things, so many podcasts, so many opinions and stuff like that, and it's always usually a lot of the same voices.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And it's finding the best bits from everybody, and I suppose that's essentially what I'm trying to do.
And how the other teachers responded to it. And at the start, obviously, it was like, give it a go. But now is it whole school's fully on board with it and really recognises the whole benefit?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Whole school's massively on board. And what it does is we get there's 2 or 3 constant teachers each week who have really bought into it. And then others come depending on the guest, and also depending on their lunch break and whatever's going on in the classrooms. And but the school has hugely bought into it, because what it enables us to do is it enables us to tick off. Sounds a bit very sort of blunt expression, but it enables better expression would be to cover areas that perhaps, and you can say, right, if you're in a all boys prep school it's not all boys at the moment because we're just turning co-educational, but a lot of boys, they perhaps are not exposed to certain areas, and by getting particular guests in, for example, we had Stuart Lawrence, who's brother of Stephen Lawrence, and his stories around when he was growing up, and also his just the impact his brother's death had on him. These are things where we are in the country, you're just not going to get them.
Yeah.
And however much we try, we can't. And so as a result, the teachers buy into it because it's sort of, they're meeting different people.
Yeah.
The children are exposed to different things. So it's fantastic.
There's a lot of stuff you can't teach as well, isn't it?
That's it. That's a better expression than I've said.
What, at the start, in terms of for yourself, how was it? How did you feel when you tried to open it up and try and convince others of it? Because obviously, one thing I'm always interested in is I speak to people starting businesses or follow their passions, like that start point where you've got doubt around you and you might have doubt of yourself. Did you ever kind of doubt yourself in that position and go, okay, this might not work, or was it always, I'm going to try and make this work, and there was no negative side towards your thinking?
It's a really good question. I always knew it would work.
Okay.
Because of the reaction it was getting in the more popular format that Jake and Damien use. Obviously, I knew that there were, and I knew from my own personal experience that these lessons are really, really important. And what I knew I had to do was show people the way and how they did it. And one of the things that was very helpful were there were two particular parents who I spoke to very early on and said, who I knew were pretty well connected, and not just well connected in terms of they worked in the city and they knew finance individuals or whatever. They knew a variety of people. And as a result, that really helped to start everything flowing. There was a chap called Spencer Bull, who's who was in the Invictus Games, and so came in his wheelchair.
Wow.
Which the children suddenly were like, oh, okay. And then we also had a chap called Ian Percy who sailed in the Olympics, and he suddenly threw out another one that will always stick with me about his the idea of the journey being far more important than the outcome.
Yeah.
So he won a silver medal and a gold medal. And his better memories were essentially around the silver medal because of the journey that it took to get there.
Yeah.
Obviously, the gold medal is important to him. And so we consistently use this idea of the process being more important than the outcome. It's the children who, for example, in my form, who sit scholarship examinations, we constantly through the whole thing, it's the journey. You will gain a lot from this journey.
Yeah.
And it's that then the snowball effect with anything. It's the tipping point was the word I was looking for. there's a Malcolm, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell book, The Tipping Point, and he talks about when you know it's hit through, and suddenly we were then going, well, it's too big for a classroom, so we've got to do it in the theatre, because suddenly, people started talking. And that's when it sort of tipped over into now. And I think the most we've had 100 odd people. And the emphasis, the one thing I haven't mentioned is that this is not compulsory for the children. It's done at lunchtime, and they can choose to come in if they want to. And then when you see people giving up half an hour of their lunchtime, you suddenly go, well, yeah, this is pretty valuable.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think about myself at, let's say, the age of 12 and 13, and if that opportunity was there. And I wonder how many of my year would have done that or gone, actually, no, I'm going to go play football.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I just wonder if the mindset of younger people is a lot more open to learning that kind of stuff. Whereas for me and stuff, we didn't really have the consciousness to really think beyond the simple things in life, which was, I've got a break time, let's go and have some fun outside. Yeah. What do you think as someone who's been there for 20 years? Like how do you see a shift in younger people in general?
I think one of the things that's most important is connection between teachers and pupils, because I think probably still there's certainly children now who still would prefer to go out and play football, but it's actually I suppose it's the next stage of evolution of the series, is that by regularly communicating lower down, children are going to do it without any prompting.
Yeah.
and they're just going to come. And it's going to could cause us a massive problem. that in some ways is my ideal, that we've got to get over it, because we'd have a massive problem. We have so many children kind of going, "Oh, this is better than playing football."
Yeah.
But that's a massive ask for 12 to 13-year-olds.
Yeah, of course, because that's the thing we've got to crack here is it's 7 to 13-year-olds, isn't it? The age group, which is really young for a lot of these concepts and ideas as well. But as you said, if you get them early enough and start thinking in that way, you can really impact their life moving forward. Because I don't think it was till I was 22 that I started thinking differently, and definitely not. I mean, I reckon 26, when I lost my uncle, unfortunately, to suicide, I had a whole shift in mindset for how I wanted to live my life. And from then, I really, really shifted how I saw myself and happiness and success. And it wasn't until something impacted my life that I did it, but you're impacting their lives so early on that hopefully it helps them establish really good grounding into actually figuring out who they want to be.
Yeah, and that's ultimately the idea, is to have as wide array of voices, that if every child who comes regularly will just pick one person and can talk about it. There's one, for example, who's a pilot who flew in Afghanistan and Iraq and told some incredible stories about going into a police station to get some prisoners out on. And the children, and apparently there was one lad who just met him in Waitrose afterwards, and he was just so bowled over by it. And equally the one we were talking about, one of your contemporaries, March, who this one lad in school, Lewis, who March is a breathwork coach, and Lewis just was bowled over by it. And he just comes to me now and just goes, I've been doing my breathing. And he loves it. And you kind of go, and it comes back full circle to that question about why do you do it? Why do you do teaching? That's why I do teaching, is when you get that animation of somebody going, yeah, this is it.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. How different was your education then to what you're seeing now when you grew up?
Hugely different. Hugely different. And because of it, I suppose I probably started on the journey a bit earlier than others in terms of understanding. I was going, this isn't working for me. Because I remember a maths teacher who basically said, here's the textbook, start at page 1 and I'll help you if you need help. I'll never forget that. And then a history teacher who had a textbook and just sat, this was A-level history, and he just sat there and just went and started talking. And it was great. But I knew then, I was like, this isn't working. I knew what I needed. And what I needed was more, I liked the discussion, but I needed more visual stuff in front of me. Yeah. I needed to be able to read stuff. I needed to whereas just 1 hour discussion, I'll switch off. Yeah. And so they were two memories that stuck with me. And also it comes back to, I mean, it's not just in the classroom, it comes back to coaching as well. So I also do rugby coaching, all sports coaching as well. And actually there was different styles of coaching when I was there, when I was at school, and now we're changing it massively and how we're doing it. We're involving the children more to help their understanding. It's not just lecture. It's very much discussion, teasing the answers out of them. And the nature of the subjects that I teach, the subject I teach with regards to philosophy-based discussions, that's what I knew when I was growing up, that's the sort of stuff I loved. But I didn't do it for A-level because it hadn't clicked with me then. But I'd say the biggest change in education is this, not just standing at the front and talking for a long time. It's actually now, right, well, that's not going to work. We've obviously got iPads we can use. We can use, I was getting some children to do the story of Buddhism the other day with a cartoons, creating their own cartoon strip. You had children who are doing, I'm just trying to remember the one now, using their iPads to find out about Buddhist stuff. You had we did 9/11, we looked at Islamophobia, and we looked at the impact of 9/11, and we've said very much it's what impact does it have on how American Muslims are treated? But instead of writing an essay, I've had children making a video. I've had children breaking up a cardboard box and putting posters and stuff all over it. And children last year made the Twin Towers and incredibly detailed and put stuff around the outside. And it's embracing that creativity, which is perhaps what we didn't have. Certainly, it was very much, bosh, head down, get on with it. This is what you need to do.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That it makes me really think about my time at university as well. So I studied architecture, and when you study architecture, you're taught about the methods of architecture, like Le Corbusier. Form follows function is a way of thinking how you would design a building. And in my final year, our teacher went, we're going to flip that. We're going to do function follows form. Yeah. And he said, what I want you to do is go to a museum, find an artifact, learn and understand how that artifact is made. So I picked a Canadian snowshoe. I had to learn how to steam bend wood, and then how to skin a rabbit, and how to stretch it to make tension and that kind of stuff. And then he said, make your own artifact as a representation of that, as that thing. And then we used that artifact to create our architecture. And there was no relation to how it's going to be. But what it did was it made you think completely differently to a whole scenario. You took a whole other approach to actually how you wanted to respond. And I think what you were saying there with getting kids to, rather than writing down an essay of how they think the impacts of Islam, the 9/11 was on the American Muslims, actually getting to do a video, getting them to create something, just sparks a different part of your brain, doesn't it, to really react in a different way. And that's how I relate to it with my uni. Like, it was completely shifted my mindset towards things like that.
And so the other thing I didn't mention on that is that we traditionally in prep schools, and certainly when you were at school, you had common entrance in history, geography, and religious studies. And what we've done with another one of your old teachers, Mr. Simmons, we've designed an end of year assessment, so to speak, but it's not a project for the year 8s when they leave, and it's all geared around skills. So they have a big question, and they have to produce a video, they have to produce a presentation, and they also have to produce take part in a debate on questions relating to the topic. And so we've got an ex-parent who comes in and teaches them about, gives them an introduction about video making. One of our school governors who used to work for the BBC comes in and talks about how to deliver the perfect presentation. And so then at the end, whilst they are doing some written-based exams, it was a conscious decision to go, well, the creative side of their brain is not being used here. Yeah. So how can we use the creative side alongside the nature of these exams? And there's another lady who came on our speaker series who said, basically, it was an expression of you do need some exams. So it's not, you can't just go, oh, throw it all up in the air. You do need that. That'd be fantastic. So they have this ability. So we did, we've had is the question that they're going to do this year is how has the term being British evolved over the last 80 years?
Wow.
And so they can speak to their grandparents, they can speak to friends. And some of these videos that's the other thing is, whilst the question is about, say, being British, or another one was, is Britain a more diverse and equal society than it was 80 years ago? The impact you get off that, whilst they produce a video, they're also chatting to people of older generations. Yeah. And the impact that has on people. I mean, one of the classic things is with the older generation, we all regret that we don't talk to them enough. And so that's come through on it. They've also learning how to stand up and deliver presentations and know what makes them effective. We've all had death by PowerPoint in presentations. And so now you've got kids 12, 13 years old standing up with just pictures on their slides and a script, and then being able to narrate their script. Wow. It's a big change.
That is, because honestly, I think that was kind of stuff I was learning when I was like 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah. You've taken it back 5 years basically, and to really help them do that, which is really interesting. Do you think that from all these changes, kids are also more confident to ask questions and more confident to be wrong and fail?
It's interesting. Far more confident to ask questions. The failure one is a really big one. That's one of our questions. That's our second question every week is, what has failure and disappointment taught you? And I think the children are more comfortable with it. But when I'm not a parent, but when you are preparing, when your child is going through life, and in the nature of the independent sector as well, about schools, it is difficult. Failure is a difficult thing. But I think yeah, I think the children particularly are kind of happy with it, and they go, oh well, and move on to the next thing. And I think the happy medium for everyone is that feeling of sort of that being allowed to happen, and still they grow as people.
Yeah. I mean, from my opinion as well, I think the failure is a bit more of a worry for parents.
Yeah.
And I know you're not going to say much there, but for me, having seen the way peer group parents respond to their children not getting the right exam results or not getting to the right schools, it becomes a kind of end of the world scenario.
Yes.
And that puts a lot of pressure on the young kids to go, oh, I've really made a big life mistake here. And it's like, no, you haven't. You're just going to go down a different path. There's always so many paths to take. You're not going to go down the one they think. You're going to go down which is right for you, kind of thing. And it's
I was having a conversation with a chap last week who has got some exams coming up, and I said to him, whatever happens doesn't define you. These results.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful character, real lad called Archie. He'll love the fact he's got a shout out, but he's a real personality, and he's so engaging to talk to. He actually had an interview practice and came across really well for someone who hadn't met him. And I said to him, that's you. Yeah. That's the most important thing. And yes, he's a bright boy. He'll get some exam results. It'd be great. But worry about that development of you as a person.
Yeah, no, 100%. Okay, let's go on to, I want to go into the education system. Like for kids aged 7 to 13, what do you think the education system's got wrong, and what do you think it's got right so far?
I think that's a good one, because in terms of what it's got right, I think it's important to distinguish between independent and state system. We're very lucky in the independent system, and I'm very conscious on this. I'm talking a lot about independent sector. There is the ability to have that change. And I think personally, seeing other teachers there are a lot of teachers, certainly in the state system as well, who would love to have the flexibility that we've got.
Yeah.
And I think the trust element of teachers, we always have to be accountable, but I think there are some really cool people out there wanting to do some great stuff. And I think there is certainly a movement to reforming education, but I don't think you can reform it. You can't just throw it all out, as we discussed earlier. There does still need to be some rigor to it. But what it's got right is that people are listening more, I think, and people are trying to, for example, my speaker series, the value's been seen in that. And actually, Jake and Damien on the podcast have recognised a need, certainly 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and it's primarily in the state system, and they've developed something there to life. I can't remember the name of it, but it's their High Performance Foundation is developing something to help others. So I think, going back, this is how I answer questions usually, which is go off the point and then come back to the coming back to the question, because it's always in my head to come back to the question. In terms of what education is getting right, there is certainly more and more influential people out there going, there needs to be some fundamental changes. What it's got wrong in the past has been possibly too much focus on exam-based results, and if you don't fit a set narrative, then children, you have to be doing this, then this, then this, and that's certainly when I grew up.
Oh yeah,
is right. You have to do GCSEs, A levels, then you go to university, then you get a steady job, and you do that for years. And talking to you when you came into school about your generation and particularly your year, people going, well, a couple of years of that.
yeah. I mean, the irony also, I still felt that pressure. Yeah. And it took me to getting fired from an architecture practice because I hated it so much for me to go, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. But it was a case of Molesford, Radley, university. How do I secure my future?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And it's like, one thing I think is really underplayed a little bit is actually the importance of trying and failing in your 20s. Like
Yes.
you've got a decade in your 20s to really go and try loads of different things. And we come out of school or university and we think, right, now I need to start making money and be successful, and I need to have success, I need to show progress, da 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 da. But actually, I actually think the people who do that the quickest still probably aren't the happiest in their lives. It's the ones who do the crazy stuff, who go travel for a bit, who go start a company and fail, who go and they figure out who they are as a person.
Yeah.
Who are the ones who come a lot more rounded when they're 30s, and they feel they're far better prepared for 30s and 40s moving forward.
So there's a great book called The Second Mountain by David Brooks, which is this idea of people want to go make money, exactly what you're saying. And then they kind of go, well, it's not actually what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And so then that's when things change. There was one of our guests was a chap I was at school with who was doing a city job, but his weekends he was driving up climbing, and he's now into climbing. That's his thing, and he set up businesses and all sorts, and but he's found that. And I think we're at a transition stage with education, that if we can get to a point where we're telling kids that when they're 13, 14 years old, they might not know their passion, but if they know their passion, we can say, right, how are we going to take you through that passion?
Yeah.
Then, and they're developing it at 22. Imagine what could happen.
Yeah. What's interesting, actually, but the last guest I had on was Jeremy Salesa. He is managing director of European Golf Design. He designs all the golf courses for the Ryder Cup, all big things. He was saying to me that he sometimes doesn't think you should have a career in your passion.
Okay.
And I've always thought differently. I've always thought if you can find something you love and you're passionate about, then you'll never work a day in your life.
Yes.
And I really believe that. But I also understand his point that if you're in your passion, what do you have your break away from?
Okay.
Which is very interesting, because I agree. I think that schools could really encourage kids to figure out what their passions are and give them the opportunities to try and make them a career path. I think that's a really logical way of helping people find probably more happiness in their lives.
And I think what you just said then is very key. You don't just have one passion.
Yeah.
And passions, I think, are important, because going back to Jeremy,
yeah.
What his point, I think if you do just have one passion, then that's the danger. It links very nicely into what one of the problems can become with teaching is if you love it and that's it, your world becomes very small.
Yeah.
And certainly as I've got older, I've tried to develop more passions outside of teaching.
Interesting.
So, for example, I remember being given a book when I was late 20s. It was Matthew Said's Bounce. And one of the parents just said, "You'll love this." I started reading it. And then I went, well, what else has he written?
Yeah.
And suddenly I've got so many books at home, school, and I'm the go-to for non-fiction.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I got into reading, and then I got into where I used to live. Group of us got together and we thought, well, we're going to try and learn a bit about wine. And so we got into that. I love my Saturdays or Friday nights or Sundays when going down to watch Bath rugby.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think if we say to kids, find your passion, but perhaps it should be find your passions.
Yeah.
So that we can be as broad a spectrum as possible.
Yeah.
And you can enjoy it at whatever level as well. You don't have to be necessarily brilliant at it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do you think your definition of happiness has changed as you got older?
Hugely.
How?
Because going back to that second mountain thing, and also I would say going back to the compassion is the thief of joy.
Mm-hmm.
I was going right, everyone else is doing this. Everybody else is, I've got mates who are earning big bucks in the city. I should be like that. Oh, they're traveling here and doing this. And then I remember a friend of mine, my oldest friend who was in reception with at prep school, goes, "Yeah, but you've got a much better view out of your window than I have." And I looked at it, I don't know if that was the trigger, but it was certainly one where I just went, yeah, you've got to value it a bit. And I was chatting to a colleague yesterday and we were just saying how it's that ability to sit and go, be content. And there's a wonderful chap called David Smith who spoke for us, who, I mean, what he's been through in life it's an incredible story. Former Olympian, and he uses the expression "be where your feet are." very Buddhist expression.
Yeah.
And so I just, it's certainly since High Performance has been kind of right. And people come to me and go, you've got so much going on. You meet all these people, you go and do this, you go and do this. It's, yeah, because I've realised that happiness is I think it's a bit, happiness comes from within. And you need to be content and happy with who you are as a person.
100%. Yeah. And I think also when people say that you got so much on, when you're doing it, it doesn't feel like you got a lot on because you can always find a time.
Yes.
People always get really caught up in this thing of, I can't manage to do this, this and this. And it's like, well, just try it and you'll prove to yourself you can do it. And you'll still have time outside that to do other things you want to do as well. I find it very interesting. Imposter syndrome.
Always.
Have you always? Okay. So how's it come about? Where have you suffered it? How have you overcome it?
I would say I've always, at times struggled with low self-esteem and imposter syndrome. Things like, well, classic has always been on the rugby field coaching when I've coached some incredible kids. Thinking, am I really good at this? Am I really?
Yeah.
And then, as we had a brief discussion earlier about it, I suddenly thought with imposter syndrome that where's that coming from? That's coming from other people's definition of what you think is right. And whereas actually it needs to be much more your definition.
Yeah.
So if it's imposter syndrome and you've defined it, but I think a lot of the time my imposter syndrome stuff has come from being, oh, well, all those people who are in this job think that they're probably think that I'm not very good. And it's like, well, no, but you don't know that.
Yeah, there's no evidence to support that.
Yeah. It's all come from reading too much on social media or listening to the wrong people when actually you need to listen to yourself more.
Yeah. Alex Hormozy says, it's about low self-esteem. I can't remember something else. He said, if you can build up a book of undeniable evidence to prove that you can do it, then you've got no reason to ever doubt yourself.
Yeah.
And for yourself, I'm sure it would be the same. You probably coach enough kids who've gone on to be fantastic rugby players to prove to yourself that you're a good enough rugby coach.
Yeah. It's also in the classroom. It's it's things like writing these deep philosophical essays on, and then it's suddenly there's a lad who is in his upper sixth now, who wrote me a card saying thank you for you've helped me with essay writing. It's helped me so much. I was like, really? But it's always that. But I think having that one of the things with imposter syndrome is that it means you don't rest on your laurels too much.
Yeah.
You're always trying to improve. Yeah. And I didn't have a great result yesterday on the rugby field, and I'm there going, should I be doing it? And then the other side of it, I was messaging the director of sport on the way down here, just going, we're going to get better. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's the mind. I just bought a book. I think it's on a bookshelf behind me somewhere. Where is it? It's there. Don't believe everything you think. I'm really looking forward to reading that one.
I think I might need to get that one.
But I think it's so easy to get caught up in our minds and setting, I guess, a narrative or an expectation of what we think other people think, without ever having anything to stimulate it other than our own doubts.
Totally.
And it's really, and it's not something you can get rid of really at all, because I think it's very a natural part of being human as well. There's some people who won't have it, but a natural part of going, should I really be here? Do I deserve to be here? Why am I here? Kind of thing. And we kind of have those existential thoughts, don't we? And let them kind of like run out, I guess. Okay, what's the biggest self-limiting belief that you've overcome?
Good one. I mean, the biggest self-limiting belief is it goes back to, I wouldn't say I've overcome it. I would say I'm getting there. Is this whole sort of self-belief and self-doubt, and I think it probably comes back to when I was at school, and there were a lot of people who were it's this definition of success is exam results, success is big city jobs, earning loads of money, and then I think probably that's it, really. And I suppose I would say I'm probably in the process of it, of realizing what's important, and it's being content with I suppose, yeah, I'd go back to something I was going to mention earlier, that a friend of mine was saying, oh, we need to go off and do this, we need to go off and do this as a group. We're all like sort of, and I said to him, but it's the little things that are the most important. Yeah. And so there was one of the chaps just goes, oh, should we all go and watch this film in Wallingford at the Corn Exchange and just go for some food beforehand? And I was going, yeah, sounds great. And I was telling the other chap, said, that's really important.
Yeah.
These are, and I suppose, flipping the question back round again, as I do, is this idea that going from thinking you have to have these big things to being these little things, being so, so important. As I said, we went and had a burger and a beer and then watched this film by this chap, Ed Jackson, who, his journey, the mountain within me, and how, and it was what, 10 quid for the film and a bit more to go and have a burger and stuff, but it meant the world. Yeah. And I think when you get to that point in life where you can be happy with the littler things, I think it's really important. You stop chasing the massive things.
Yeah, and you build consistency over the little things. And
totally.
Yeah, no, I love that. What does fulfilment mean to you?
Fulfilment for me is a sort of constant little hurdles, particularly with the kids at school, is when you see, it's not so much what they've done on the page, it's what's watching them grow and develop into the nature of the 13-year-olds that I have. Suddenly you're having these wonderful conversations, and that's very fulfilling because I've been part of their journey for sometimes 5-6 years. And when you see them, for some, fulfillment might be an A grade in the subject you teach, but fulfillment for me is another couple of shout outs to lads in my form, but Zach and Noah probably are two who you can sit and just have these amazing conversations about. I mean, I'm chatting about Bob Dylan and Nirvana in the morning, and Zach is coming in with Noah, that is, and Zach's coming in going, oh, well, sir, I think I've recognised that perhaps I could have done this a bit better, or I could have, and is spotting the little things, the little life skill things. I think it would have helped if we'd perhaps as a class all done this. And that's fulfillment, is when you have helped them to that stage in life. You think things will happen as a result.
Mm. Has the fear of failure ever stopped you from trying something?
Yes, but it's getting better. So there were times where I was traveling and I would go, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. It looks really scary. And then I've regretted it. There was one time I traveled where I was worried about money and didn't go. I probably could have. I was in Sydney and there was an opportunity to go to, I think it would have been a flight out and doing Ayers Rock.
And
I thought, I'm not sure I've got enough money. And I was thinking, I was at the age where I would have to have, the email did exist. Mum and dad, and just say, oh, can you put a bit more? And I thought, oh no, I won't do that. And I regretted that. But now recently there was, for example, another one of our ex-teachers who taught you, Mr. Murray. Went down to see him, and he said, oh, come and play touch rugby. And I was like, I'm too old, too slow. And I thought, it's the 2nd of January. And I thought, it's never going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
No, it happened. And I turned up, and there were two guys who'd played Wales touch rugby. And I was like, and they looked about 15 years younger than me. I thought, in my head was going, give it a go, give it a go. And I did, and I was quite slow. But I felt brilliant afterwards. But I think how I've grown as a person has come through the talks, listening to the podcasts, and it all comes back to wish I'd had it as a kid.
Yeah. Do you reckon you've been impacted the most by the talks or the kids?
Good question. Really good question. I would say probably me has been the most impacted by high performance in general as a concept, and have to give them a shout out as well. They've been very supportive of everything we've done, and we've featured as guests on it, and also there's a lovely advert about Jake saying that he wishes he had a teacher like me.
I saw that.
Which is great. Yeah, I've definitely been impacted, and I definitely was at a point where I wouldn't try stuff for fear of failure. And it's ridiculous. When I look at it now, it's ridiculous because I remember it was freezing cold on Cranley Rugby Club. I think it was the 2nd of January this year. And I was free, but I came away going, yeah, it wasn't great. Boy, do I feel good because I've done it. And if I could bottle that and go back 20 years, I would use it.
Well, you could start it now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's never too late to start that new kind of mindset towards it, I think, because I think that for me, failure evolved into something. It evolved from being something I was scared of to something which I need to go through to grow.
Totally.
You know, like I actually chase failure a bit now. Like I'm willing to put myself on the line, and if it fails, I go, okay, cool. But I'd rather be on that kind of periphery of what failure and success is, on the edge of it, than be safe in the middle.
Yeah.
Because I think you look back when you're 18, you go, I could have tried a bit harder. I could have risked a little bit more. And I think without the risk and taking those risks, there's no real reward for life and stuff you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's the one that we use a lot with the kids of life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Yeah, yes.
And I use it alongside a photo of me with my me hanging over the edge of Victoria Falls.
Yeah.
And that was another time where I just went, I jumped into a infinity pool at the top of Victoria Falls.
Yeah.
And I showed the kids the drop off the edge of it and showed with me looking over the edge of it. And he's going, well, yeah, anything could have gone wrong there.
Yeah.
But I did it.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100. What's the? Okay. It just reminded me of a quote. So it's now, you know, Naval Ravikant.
Yeah.
His quote of, "We all have two lives, and our second life begins when we realise we only have one."
Yeah.
And it's really, really powerful. And that's really motivated me, is the whole thing of like realising that we only get one chance to do this. And actually, I heard someone else say something, which was, we all try and live this perfect life, and we all try and make it exactly how it needs to be, so people look in awe and go, oh, look how good he lived. But actually, the best way to live life is to experience everything, every kind of emotion, every kind of failure and success, every kind of up and down, all that kind of stuff, and go, I've had a full life of everything rather than a narrow life of just this.
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting with that, and it's something which I definitely hold moving forward with, for sure.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, final couple of questions. What's your advice then to other teachers who are out there looking to inspire their kids more and try and maybe help shift their mindset towards more of these kind of conversations?
I think the biggest advice I'd give, because I know how busy the day is and the week is for teachers, and I certainly know in the independent sector, although it's interesting times at the moment, we're very lucky with the time that we can have, and is that these sorts of things are achievable, but I think it goes back to this comparison thing again. Is you wouldn't have to look at the list of speakers I've got, that some of them we've been lucky to have to pay for them, but we've got them in connections and things like that. That's not the definition of what success in this is.
Yeah.
It's like, you could set it up with half a dozen of your parents who've done these things, and if they then it's this snowball effect. It is achievable, but it's continuing to ask these questions but finding the time for it and valuing the time for it. That this is as important as ticking off a box for lesson 3, whatever. Because it will have a fundamental impact on. I mean, there are children who come back now from a couple of years ago who still talk about speakers that we've had. Yeah.
Wow.
And it is achievable. It's this whole business of going back to it. You look ahead and you think, basically, oh no, I can't do that because, and actually, it's perhaps thinking, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
And I wait until something goes wrong, as opposed to thinking it's going to go wrong straight away. So yeah, that would be my biggest advice. Would be, it's achievable. And if anybody wanted advice on the sorts of people to look for, the other thing I would say is finding those people that have done different jobs. And we had a lady come in talking about her genealogy career. We had a man who talked about his adventure cycling business, and then we've also had Martin Johnson, who captained England rugby. That's the two sort of poles apart. Is the sort of we've had people who are just friends of effectively a parent who lived down the road to somebody who knew one of our teachers through different connections. Every school will have somebody somewhere who is the kids will go, wow, when they listen to it.
Yeah. No, great advice. Okay, final 3 questions. How do you encourage young people to dream more and fear less?
It's this sort of, it's keeping that open mind, and continuing to ask them questions, and say that goes back to it links very nicely into Simon Squibb, who's on a lot talking about what's your dream, but it's him saying why not, and so I want to go off and do this. Well, why can't you? And having those questions which continue to open minds, as opposed to, I think the danger is as we go, when you're younger, when you're 4 or 5 years old, you play with stuff, you can do whatever. And then suddenly someone says no, suddenly your world gets smaller. Yeah. And it's having that ability to go, well, why not? And then actually, when it's that, I mean, I did talk once at school about having a failure board around things that kids have tried and have not succeeded on. And it's that sort of links also to, it's having those, reading a lot as well, and having positive stories around what can happen when things go wrong. Google do a wonderful thing which we did around the Genius Hour, where they encourage people. They say, well, go and have a go at it. What's it going to cost us? And they have a set budget, and they allow a certain number of people to do it. And if it works, and some of the best Google ideas have come from people just being allowed to run with it.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes back to what we said earlier about people saying, well, I'd like to do this. Well, why not?
Yeah. No, interesting.
Yeah.
Correct. What are the keys to succeeding and following your dreams?
Open mind, a wide range of connections, not being determined. For example, Simon Squibb, who we mentioned earlier, I'm badgering on social media. And we've got to a point on Friday where he said, well, when do you want me to come? In response to a post. And I said, well, when does it work? And then he hasn't replied again. So I've got to go again on another post.
Give him a date.
Yeah.
Give him
and I'm going to say, come on this day. Can you do it? And also being flexible. So, for example, that's the beauty of, since I think what's helped with our High Performance Lunchtimes has been this idea of saying to people, right, you can do it online.
Yeah.
And so we've had numerous people online, but being and say, right, well, we've got this date and this day, and also giving the understanding people that you're working with. I mean, I could go on forever on this, really, but it's a flexibility, being a good communicator, not being put off if you don't get something straight away. Some of the speakers we've had, Ed Jackson, who's coming up in early March, I badgered him through so many different avenues, to the point where I got to where he finally replied on one, I think it might have been Instagram, and he said, a view of the fact he had actually been to the school and stuff and the connections, fine, I'll do it. And I was like, yes.
Good. And then leave me alone after.
Yeah, basically. There is a certain element of that goes on, and there's a certain element on the messages where I go, I'm really sorry I've been badgering you, but...
Yeah. Right, it's the only way to do it, honestly, sometimes.
Well, there was a parent of... I don't think it was... ex-Molson parent who had sons around your age, but not you. I remember him saying about, for example... He said, well, if you fail, if you send them an email, it doesn't work, go knock on the door.
Yeah.
And Ian Stafford, who came and spoke, his journalism thing, he said, I think he wrote 13 letters to a newspaper to get involved. And then then the 13th, and didn't get replied till the 13th. The 13th was no. And then he wrote them another one and said, well, I'm in the building next door. Can I come in? That was a lie. And he got into it as a result. It's
persistence, determination.
Totally. Yeah.
I agree. Final question. What's the one lesson you would like to teach your future students about life and happiness?
That don't compare yourself to other people.
Interesting.
And follow your dreams.
Yeah.
And value your dreams as well.
Value them.
Yeah. Because I think you can say your dreams, if you want to do something. I probably knew I wanted to go into this sort of route with psychology and understanding of people. I remember going to a lecture when we went on a university visit. Everyone else went off for lunch, let's just say. And I went, well, no, I'm going to go back and do it. But I didn't perhaps back myself enough.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was, not everyone else is doing that, so it's probably a bit weird.
Yeah.
But actually, if I probably, who knows where I'd have gone. But I'd say follow your dreams and value your dreams as well.
Yeah, no, really lovely. Mr. Weeksy, you're Outlaw number 30. Thank you so much for coming on and shedding light to how you are inspiring the younger generations and the next generations to, I guess, be more consciously present of how they want to live their lives, who they want to be, and how they can, I guess, chase happiness. I really appreciate your time and really commend you for what you're doing because I think it's invaluable.
Thank you.
Really do. So,
it's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for listening to the Valley of Outlaws podcast. If you enjoyed it, please do share it with friends and family. And please see all of our news across our socials